Great. Thanks, Ant, and hi everybody, and welcome to today's Startup Club session where, we're going to be talking about how you plan and develop your marketing strategy as a new business. A number of you I will have met already, and a few of you would have been at the launching a new product webinar that I was presenting a few weeks ago. So I'll just briefly introduce myself to those who I've not met before. So my name's Ashley Cavers and I'm a business advisor with OxLEP, working on a number of their startup and growth programs. And I guess of particular relevance to today, I also have a background in journalism, marketing and PR, having worked in the past for Sky and for BBC, as well as running my own PR and marketing consultancy. And finally, also hopefully of relevance today, is I also run a growing startup business myself called the Wonky Food Company. And we make products from imperfect and surplus fruit and veg. And if you were at the session the other week, you would have heard me talk about our journey at Wonky to demonstrate how we took an idea and turned it into a product or service that was ready for market. So today we're going to be talking about the next steps. So you've launched your product or service, you're open for business and you're ready to sell. And we should take a moment to say that that is a huge achievement to have actually got that far. But as many of you are no doubt discovering now, the hard work in many ways is only just beginning. So I just want to kick off with a scary stat here. So according to Companies House records, more than 665,000 new companies were created in the UK in the 12 months up to March last year. So that is more than one a minute. And the number being created this year is set to become the highest on record as the fallout from COVID prompts many more people to start up their own venture. But I'm giving you that statistic not to scare you, because I think actually this is really exciting. It illustrates that all of you are not just part of a growing startup club and startup community right here in Oxfordshire, but you are part of a new national and international wave of business startups. And I think that's something that's very exciting and that we should be celebrating and supporting at a time when, let's face it, there's not an awful lot to celebrate right now. But, and there's always going to be a but, with all of these businesses starting up, it's really important that you can find a way of being seen and heard with your business, of cutting through that noise and making sure that you get noticed. So having that good product or service to begin with is, of course, paramount. A product or service that meets that customer need, is well designed, well executed and delivered, and comes with great customer service and a strong brand. And a number of those areas we touched upon in the previous webinar. But the harsh truth is you can have the best product or best service in the world, but if no one hears about it, then you're not going to make those sales that you need as a business to survive and be able to grow. So I think it's just worth reinforcing at the very beginning why all new businesses need a marketing strategy. Because I think there's still a danger that too many businesses see marketing as a nice to have rather than a need to have. Perhaps you see it as something to spend money on once you're a bit bigger or you're a bit more established. But actually, when you're a startup, right at the very beginning is when you need marketing the most. So for the avoidance of doubt, I think let's just be clear about the benefits of marketing. So first off, you need marketing to be able to promote your business. You need to promote your business in order to be able to increase sales and attract customers. But also, even more important, once you've attracted those customers, you need to use marketing to be able to retain those customers so they keep coming back and buying from you. And marketing is also really important to make sure that you can remain competitive and grow as a business. So that's all about why you need marketing, but how do you implement an effective marketing strategy? And I think it's important to be clear that if you do have the budget, there are lots of options to be able to outsource this part of your business. From large multi-channel marketing agencies who will look after every aspect of your marketing activity, to freelancers who might specialise in one area, such as social media, for example, or digital marketing. And it has to be said that we're very lucky here in Oxfordshire because we've got some very, very talented agencies and freelance professionals right on our doorstep. But for the purpose of today, I'm going to make the assumption that most people here are pretty early stage in their business and that they're working within a budget and want to understand how to market their businesses relatively inexpensively and by yourself, at least to begin with anyway. And I think my strong advice would always be, even if you do go on to outsource elements of your marketing or even eventually employ a marketing specialist in your business, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, you should at least be familiar with the basics of marketing, even if you're not ultimately the one who's going to be responsible for it. So having a clear marketing strategy is important from the very beginning of your business. You've probably had a look already, but if you go and Google, there are a million templates and versions of marketing plans available out there. But by and large, they all cover the same core areas, which you can condense down to these key steps. So first of all, mission and vision. This is all about what you do and, more importantly, why you do it. Secondly, your marketing goals. And this is more specifically, how will your marketing help to articulate your mission and vision that you have with the business? Thirdly, getting to know your customers. This is really important, and we'll go on to look at all of these various steps, but you really need to make sure you know your customers inside out. Number 4, finding your brand voice. This is all about not what you say to your customers, but how you say it, how you speak to them, and how you make sure that you're consistent with that brand voice. Number 5, choose your channels. So as you will have already discovered, there are many, many ways to market your business, but the trick to good marketing is to identify the ones that work best for you and are most effective. And finally, action, how you actually make sure that you get stuff done in the first place. Okay, so we're going to work through all of those today. So first off, mission and vision. This is something that I'm a big believer in. I think any business needs a clear mission and vision statement. So this is all about your who, your what, and your why. And hopefully it's something that you should already have incorporated into your business plan, but it's worth repeating in your marketing plan as well. So your mission and vision doesn't have to be about lofty ambitions to change the world, although fantastic, that's brilliant if you can. But you could, for example, be a financial consultant, and your mission and vision is all about demystifying financial management and helping people to take better control of their finances and worry less about their money. Or I had a mission and vision session quite recently with a client, and at the beginning of the session, the founder of that business, he thought his business was all about manufacturing health supplements, which is what he did. But by the end of the session, he realised that was only the what, that was not the why of what he did. He realised by the end of that mission and vision session that he was about helping people live better lives by feeling healthier. That was his why. And if you haven't watched it already, I'm sure many of you have, but it's always worth giving another plug to, then I would certainly recommend watching Simon Sinek's TED Talk on Start With Why. He's a bit of a business visionary. He's written books and I think kind of gone down in startup legend by now, but it does capture this whole importance of understanding your why and your mission at the heart of your business. And it's really important because it's what steers your business. It's what keeps you focused and keeps you motivated as well. Okay. So if the mission and vision is the big picture, then you also need to get more specific about what exactly you want your marketing to do. So we already mentioned just a little earlier there about the primary goals of marketing. So it's there to promote your business, increase sales, retain customers, and compete and grow in the marketplace. So let's take that as a given that every business here today shares those primary goals of what they want their marketing to do. But individually, you all need to start to drill down a little bit further and ask, what exactly is it that you are wanting to say to your customers? What are your calls to action? What are the key messages you want to communicate in order to help achieve those primary goals? So you can start to unpick these with a good old-fashioned brainstorm or whiteboard session with other members of your team if you have one, or if you're by yourself, then perhaps with a trusted advisor or a mentor or even a friend. And you'll undoubtedly already have a lot of these marketing messages in your head already, but sometimes the challenge is recognizing them and being able to articulate them effectively in all of your marketing and messaging. So if I take the Wonky Food Company as an example, because that's obviously the company that I know best. So we actually quite recently had a great session with the wonderful Independent Oxford, who are a local organisation. Check them out if you haven't already. And we worked with them to help us define the goals and the messages that we most wanted to communicate with our customers, so that we could help engage those customers and ultimately increase sales, and in our case also increase our impact by stopping more food from being wasted. So with Wonky, we identified our specific or core goals, which were one, to raise awareness about and ultimately to reduce food waste. Two, to encourage people to value food provenance more, so really value where their food comes from. And also to demonstrate the quality and the versatility of the products that we were producing. But in the course of identifying those core messages, we also uncovered other themes and messages that broadly fit within those core goals, but were still really useful for us to tease out. So these are the things that help to identify us as a brand and which we want to be part of our marketing message. So, for example, that's about having a passion for a cause, being more than just a product, just a relish. Also, for us, it's about being part of a wider wave of conscious consumerism. So that is people wanting to buy more ethically and more sustainably. And also, we realised that we wanted to challenge the notion that just because we're using waste product doesn't mean it should be cheap to the end customer. So having a list somewhere or a whiteboard of all these key marketing messages or goals, it then gives you the triggers for being able to create that all important content that is relevant for your brand and for your business. So this is all about identifying what you want to talk about. But once you've identified that, then it's really crucial that you can identify who you want to say it to. So that's when we need to talk about our customers. So hopefully in your business planning and research stage, you will already have done quite a bit of work on this. And it's something that we did touch upon in a previous Startup Club session about launching your new product or service. But I think it's something that I wanted to expand on a bit today. So as part of your research phase, you will have identified who your target customer is, or target customers, because many of us will have more than one key customer base. But when it comes to your marketing, it's also worth going a stage further and really getting to know your customer pretty much like they're your best friend. And a really useful exercise is to create a customer avatar, or sometimes called a buyer persona. And again, you can go online and Google and find 100 different templates for doing this. But this slide here shows the key areas that you need to focus on and some of the questions that you need to be asking. So, for example, understanding key information such as how old are your customers? What do they do for a living? What do they do in their free time? And what sorts of activities do they enjoy and give them pleasure? You also need to ask about their influences. So are they using social media? If so, what social media do they use? What brands do they buy when they go out and shop? And also really important to understand is, what are their pain points? So what are their problems? What are the challenges or needs that your business is out there trying to solve? So to illustrate this, here's a profile of one of our Wonky Food Company customer targets. So these very smug looking individuals we've called Harry and B, and we identified these two pretty early on in our market research. So Harry and B, just to run through this, so they are professional 30-somethings. They've got a pretty healthy combined household income. They're probably thinking of starting a family, or they may already have one or two small children, probably under the age of 4. They're likely to be city-based. They're probably living in Oxford or London or Leeds or Edinburgh. They're very health conscious, these two, as you can probably tell. They're possibly vegetarian, maybe vegan. Pre-COVID, when we could all go out and do things, they loved shopping. They'd go hang around their local farmers market on a Saturday morning. Then in the evening, they like to entertain friends. They like cooking. They'll buy the Sunday papers. They might occasionally get the Guardian on a Saturday, but they get a lot of their information and are quite heavily influenced from the things that they read on social media. And why do they buy Wonky? Well, they buy it primarily because of our mission. So they want to feel like they're making a difference, even in tiny ways like buying a jar of relish. So an exercise like this, might feel a little bit contrived or a bit extreme, but it really, really does help to shape your marketing, because let's face it, you can't say anything effective unless who you're talking to. So Harry and B were an early target market for us as a business. And as we launched, which just over 2 years ago now, we were fairly confident that there would be plenty of Harry and B's who buy into our product. But an interesting thing happened, and as we started to sell and get a better picture of our customers, we also found we had another unexpected target market. So meet Steve. Now, we had no idea about Steve when we started our business, but it actually turns out that Steve is a really important customer of ours. So we found this out by going to events, going to food festivals, farmers markets, by doing tastings, and time and again we bumped into Steve, or people like Steve. So who is Steve? Well, he's male, clearly, between 40 to 65. He's possibly an early retiree, loves his food, probably likes to grow his own, might even have his own allotment. He's very interested in local news and events. He reads all of the local papers and listens to the radio quite a lot as well. So he does care about where his food comes from, but it's not his number one reason for buying. So he buys our relishes because he likes the taste. And the reason I'm telling you all of this, the reason I'm telling you about Steve, is that he demonstrates that understanding your customer is an evolving process, and you can't assume from the get-go that you know who it is who's going to be buying from you. So you need to be prepared to be attracting customers you didn't expect to attract, and then that means you need to adapt your marketing strategy accordingly. So it's worth, if you haven't done this already, trying to develop some of these customer profiles or personas yourself. Do it a pen and ink version, a digital version, but print them out, write them out, stick them up on the wall of your office or near your desk at home. And every time you go to write a Facebook post or write a new blog, or send out a newsletter, you need to be thinking about Steve or Harry or B, or obviously the equivalents for your business, and it will make the job easier, even if it does seem a little bit contrived to begin with. They soon will become your best friends, believe me. Okay, so now you've identified what you want to say, and you've also identified who you're wanting to say it to, but also of equal importance is how you say it. So every time you post or tweet or blog or write an article or a newsletter, even down to how you sign off an email, you are using your brand voice for your business. And this applies equally to B2B as well as B2C brands. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking this is only about B2C, business to consumer, but actually it's really important if you're a B2B business as well. And what's really crucial is that you are clear and consistent in this voice, because that's how people start to buy into you and your product or your service, because they feel like they're getting to know you in the same way that you are getting to know them. They know what to expect from your brand values, from your culture, from your customer service, because it's reflected in the way that you speak and communicate on a daily basis. So how do you find your tone of voice? Well, some of you are probably a step ahead of me here looking at the slide, but a quick and quite useful exercise is just to choose 10 adjectives that you think describe your business. So on the slide there, you've got a list of lots of adjectives, clearly not exhaustive. And you might just want to have a go at this now while we're here, while I'm chatting. So just pick out 10 adjectives that you think describe your business best. And it might be that your business is you, that you're selling your services, your skills, your expertise. So if that's the case, then this is partly going to be an exercise in describing yourself. Clearly, you only want to pick the good bits here, because good marketing, as you will discover, is all about being selective in what you reveal and what you keep behind. So I'll just give you a moment in case you are doing that now, and also just to say, don't overthink it. You probably, without knowing it, have a pretty instinctive feel for what is true to you and true to your brand and business. And obviously, you can pick any other adjectives that come to mind as well. But the tricky bit is, once you've got that 10, I then want you to whittle that down to 3. So that is a little bit harder and might be something that you dwell on after the session today. But hopefully you can see the point in what you're doing here. It's all about thinking about how you want to project yourself and your business, your brand in your wider marketing. And doing an exercise like this just helps you to hone in and discover what that tone of voice is and what works for you. Okay, so we've looked at what you want to say, we've looked at who you want to say that to, and now we need to work through, all importantly, how you want to say it, and how you get that content across to your customer or client. So clearly, in this day and age, in the world of digital media, there are multiple channels, and by channels, what I mean are the tools and the mediums that you use to communicate with your customers, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, your website. And what's really important is that you think carefully about choosing the right channels for you and your business. And for those of you who were at the session I ran the other week, you might remember then that I warned against the danger of falling down the rabbit hole of branding and marketing. I've seen way too many businesses, and I've certainly been guilty of doing this myself, where you can make that mistake of being busy with your marketing as being productive. That you spend a day on Twitter and Instagram posting all these lovely images about your business, following lots of other lovely businesses, but actually that's only a worthwhile exercise if it's generating results for you. We can all be busy on Twitter or Instagram, but let's face it, unless you're actually attracting more followers who are then actually converting into sales of your product or service, then really all that activity is vanity at the end of the day. So on the next couple of slides, we have a matrix of some of the marketing channels available to you. Now you can read these, after the session at your leisure, but I think it's worth spending a little bit of time today just to go through to understand the benefits of each, and there may be some in the mix there that you hadn't thought of before, that you hadn't thought were relevant to your business. So first up, email. Now it's funny, email almost in this world of social media that we live in, email seems quite antiquated or old-fashioned these days, but you should never underestimate the value of a really good mailing list. So using a platform like MailChimp, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, or there's another one called Constant Contact, which I've heard some good things about. These sorts of tools make it really easy these days to design newsletters and also to be able to schedule when you send them, and most importantly of all, be able to measure who you're reaching. So you can actually, with these tools, you can see how many people are opening and reading your emails, how many of them are just sending them straight to their bin. And the great thing about emails is that you can also segment your audience into different groups so that you can be very targeted in your messaging. So at the Wonky Food Company, for example, we have one mailing list which we send out to trade, so to all of the the shops, the retailers, the wholesalers and distributors that we work with, who of course are a very different customer base to the end user, to you and I browsing through the supermarket or the local deli looking at what to buy. We have different messaging for both of those groups, but they're equally important to us as a business. People often ask, when it comes to newsletters as well, how often they should be sending out a newsletter. And the simple answer is really when you have something of value to say to your customers. And that is not the same as what you feel is of value to you. I get quite annoyed when I receive umpteen newsletters from businesses and brands that are just bragging about the latest award that they've won, or the networking meeting that they've been to. These are all things that are important to that person in the business, but are they really of interest to the customer, to you and I as buyers of their products? So always try and put yourself, remember your Harry and B's, remember your Steves. What are they going to be wanting to read about? They probably want to know about special offers or promotions, or a new product that's been launched, or a new shop where your product is available, or a new service that you're introducing or launching. But in terms of a simple answer to how often you should be sending a newsletter, it's probably no less than every 3 months, but never more than once a week. You don't want to be annoying your customers is the bottom line. So secondly, your website. So if you have a website, and I can think of very few businesses who in this day and age wouldn't have one, then you want to make sure that people can find it. I'm sure many of you have heard by now of SEO, so search engine optimization. It's often regarded as a bit of a dark art in marketing, but essentially it's just about being able to boost your website to the top of those all-important internet search rankings so that more people can actually find your business and engage with you. Because it can be a bit technical. This is commonly one area of marketing that people are quite quick to outsource, even just to get a digital marketing expert to come in for a day or two to do a quick once over of your website, make sure that you have important things like your tags and keywords all in one place. So that can be quite a useful thing to do. But if you can't afford to outsource this part, then that's fine. There are other resources out there as well. It's worth checking out a site which has been recommended to me on a number of occasions called Ahrefs. I know quite a few small businesses who've used this resource, especially in the early days, just to help teach them the basics of SEO, and it can be really valuable. But another great and free resource is Google's Digital Garage. So look that up if you haven't come across it already. And here you can access a series of completely free courses on every aspect of digital marketing. And, as I was saying earlier on, even if ultimately you're not going to be responsible for these elements of your business, any good entrepreneur should be familiar with all of these nuts and bolts and what they mean and why it's important as part of your toolkit. And again, I think even though I think pretty much without exception, everybody needs at least a basic landing page as a website these days, be clear if your website is not the main way that you are going to pick up customers, if it instead is going to be through word of mouth, through referrals, or through networking perhaps, then don't worry about SEO as much. It's not going to be a priority for you as much as it would be for an e-commerce business, for example, which will be doing most of its selling online. So it's all just about prioritizing which channels are most important for you. So working through there, next up is social media. So I'm going to take it as read that everybody here today knows knows their Twitter from their Facebook, from their Instagram. We did touch upon this in the product webinar a couple of weeks ago, and I don't want to spend too much time on it today, because let's face it, we could have an entire day session just talking about the ins and outs of Facebook. So today I really just want you to think about what social media channels are the most suitable for your business, and to make sure you don't fall into that trap of feeling like you have to use them all. So again, if you're an e-commerce business with some lovely products that are very visual and aesthetically pleasing, then you need to be all over Instagram, because it's all about the visuals, right? But if you're running that financial services business we mentioned earlier, then Instagram and Facebook are maybe not the most appropriate channels for you. You instead need to be all over LinkedIn. But those that you do use, the channels that you do use, and I think this is the key takeaway, you just need to make sure that you're posting regularly and that you're consistent in your messaging and tone of voice. So those areas that we looked at earlier, what are the key messages you want to be talking about, and how do you convey them to your audience? I just mentioned LinkedIn there, and I just had a quick jump earlier on the OxLEP Eventbrite page, and there's actually a free webinar next Wednesday all about how to grow your business on LinkedIn. So if you think that might be useful for you, especially if you're a B2B business, then that might be worth popping along to. In my experience talking to businesses, LinkedIn is a really underused tool, especially for service businesses. So that could be quite valuable. Okay, so moving on then to content marketing. So content marketing is all about making sure you're promoting your area of expertise by writing. It could be writing how-to guides, blogs, or case studies that can really help you build a strong reputation in your area or field of expertise. It can also, crucially, help with your SEO and drive more customers to your website in the first place. The downside is it can take a bit of time, but actually I think it's also one of the more enjoyable and creative parts of the marketing process. And you can also over time build up a bank of content that you can repurpose and reuse. Just because you've posted something once doesn't mean you can't take that content the following year. If it's something that you're writing to coincide with Easter or Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, all events around this time of year, then you can use that as your base content, and each year just tweak and repurpose it and use it again. Okay, so I'm just going to take a slug of water before we go on to the next slide. I realise we're covering quite a lot here, and there will be time to unpick some of it at the end and answer some of your questions. So the next few channels, so PR. Now, I actually used to work as a journalist, and also had my own PR consultancy for a while. And I think a lot of small businesses really miss an opportunity to get some valuable free coverage for their business. You don't need to pay for it. If you think about it, from local papers to national magazines to TV and radio, we have this 24-hour news and media machine now, and journalists need content. So if you have a good story to tell, then you should be reaching out to journalists and to all of these different outlets. And even better, if you have a newsworthy hook as well to hang that story on, then journalists are going to be biting your hand off. And these days, there are actually some great platforms that help to connect brands and businesses, especially startups like you. Everybody wants to hear a good startup story about somebody who's trying something new. So I've mentioned a couple of platforms there, like Bulb Hangout and Pressloft.com. I'm on one of them myself. I know a lot of other businesses and brands who've had some fantastic and totally free coverage in national media just by being part of these networks. They have pretty low cost memberships. There is a cost involved, but it's just another great way to be able to pitch your products and services directly to journalists, and also just to educate yourself as to the sorts of things that journalists are looking for and how to tell your story. Another useful tip, if you're on Twitter, is to search the hashtag journo requests. So journalists use this when they're looking for a subject for a story. So if you follow business journalists, or they could be journalists or bloggers who you have already identified write about your particular area or sector, then it's another great way of being able to pitch in directly to journalists without having to blanket bomb them with a press release and then just hoping that they're going to read that and get back to you. So next category will be exhibitions and events. So do you remember these? Way back in the day before COVID, when we could go along to events and trade shows and exhibitions. So clearly at the moment, not quite so relevant, but they are going to come back. Clearly, we will be going back out to exhibitions and events at some point in the future. And they can be a really, really valuable way of meeting with engaged and motivated customers. It can be quite pricey, booking a pitch or a stand at some of these events, but they are a great way of making not only direct sales if you're a product business, but also collecting useful leads and data to then be able to follow up on. You might have a new product, for example, that you want to trial at one of these events, and it's a great way of getting that, of doing that market research and getting that direct customer feedback. But it's really important. I see a lot of people that will go and spend a few £1,000s having their fancy stand in an exhibition. They do the event and hurrah, pat themselves on the back, but then they don't follow up with all those important leads and contacts and connections that they've made during the event. So make sure that you do follow up with anybody who's expressed an interest. Advertising as well. So again, being early stage businesses, you might feel that you don't really have the budget for advertising, but advertising these days doesn't have to be huge billboards or a glossy double page spread in a magazine. With digital marketing these days, there are many effective ways to run quite targeted, inexpensive campaigns. So, for example, running a Facebook or a Google ad campaign can be actually a really great way of reaching people for not a lot of money. But the important thing with all forms of advertising is that you're, where you can, measuring the return on that investment that you've made. So this is easier to do, of course, with a product-based business, as you can directly map those who've clicked through from an ad, for example, to make a purchase. Whereas with a service business, that can be a slightly more manual process of tracking back the leads and where did they hear about you, what advert did they see, how do they know you exist. But the general message stays the same. You want to make sure that you are spending every precious penny at this stage in your business, that you're spending it wisely. So do try and measure whenever you can. And finally, in our pick of marketing channels is direct mail and leafleting. So this has fallen out of fashion somewhat in recent years, rightly so, partly because of the environmental cost of doing a mail drop. But while this obviously is something to bear in mind, a well-targeted leaflet campaign can still be a really effective way of reaching customers. If you think about how many emails and digital adverts we all consume these days and feel bombarded by, actually receiving something physical and tactile that's well designed and well thought through can be really appealing in its novelty value. I spoke to a business recently which printed up some beautiful postcards, something which can be done really cheaply online, and it's sent to all of its past and current customers during the first lockdown. And on each of those postcards, it included just a very brief handwritten message. It wasn't selling anything directly. It was just literally checking in with its customers, saying, hi, how are you? Thinking of you at this time. And by doing that, it was, of course, reminding their customers that it was still open for business. And it actually secured, the boss was telling me, it was the best campaign even though he hadn't really thought about it as being a campaign, but the best campaign he'd ever run, that the rate of conversion, the inquiries, the phone calls that he got just off the back of that was really impressive. So the point there is that sometimes that personal touch can sometimes make a real difference. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of your key marketing channels, but there is just one further marketing tool that I wanted to pay particular attention to today, because I think it gets very overlooked, but it's really, really important and something that we can all do in our businesses, and that is the case study. So when I talk about case studies, I'm also including here testimonials, reviews, and recommendations as well into this category. So what the case study can do so effectively in this age of digital overload and automation is actually bring back that personal experience, which can be very powerful. So most of us as customers are not very brave. We don't like to take risks. We don't like to be the first to try something new. There are clearly exceptions, but as a general rule, we like to play safe. So we want to hear that somebody else has tried and tested the product or service that we're thinking of spending our hard-earned money on. It's why a 5-star review on TripAdvisor is always going to be more powerful for that hotel owner than any glossy advert it might splash out on in one of the travel mags. So the key ingredients of a good case study are effectively presenting the problem or the challenge, the need of the customer, and then demonstrating how you solve or meet that need as a business or service provider. And that goes right back to the heart, the value proposition that should be at the heart of your business. And then once you've identified the problem and how you solve it, it's about illustrating how you met that problem. So whether that's by a short piece of text or using pictures, video or audio, you really want to be able to bring that case study to life. And as you'll probably be wanting to share it on your social media channels, you want to be able to grab people's attention, and video in particular is an effective way of doing this. But importantly, keep it short. You don't want a Scorsese epic or a testimonial which is the length of a novel. It needs to be something that other customers can digest quickly and easily, but which also hits the mark. And finally, but I think most importantly, is you need to stay authentic. None of us, we're all customers here as well as business owners, and none of us as customers want to feel like we're being overtly sold to, even if on one level we know that that's exactly what's happening. But we can all spot that hollow sales speak a mile away, and it's a total turn off. You don't want to listen to it, do you? So you need to make sure that in your case studies and your testimonials, we can actually hear the customer talking or the client and hear their own words, not just some sales patter. Okay. So now you have hopefully chosen a pick and mix of your, to put in your marketing toolbox with, various tools and channels at your disposal. But the next challenge and the final one in our marketing strategy is execution. It's taking action. It's actually getting the stuff done that you know that you need to do. So one of the most common challenges I hear when talking to small businesses, and I will hold my hand up here and include my own business here as well, it's finding the time. Marketing so often slips to the bottom of our to-do lists as it's seen as something to do perhaps, as I said earlier, once you're a bit bigger or more established or you have more sales, then you can focus on your marketing. But without effective marketing, you won't achieve those additional sales. So the two have to go hand in hand. But there are ways in which you can stop your marketing feeling like a mountain that you have to climb. And the very first thing is to have that plan or map of your core marketing activity. So those channels that you've decided are the best fit for your business. And this doesn't have to be too sophisticated. So it can just be this slide that I've just pulled up, can be just a straightforward grid or spreadsheet, an at a glance overview, if you like, of your key channels, also the timings, who you're going to be targeting, and what you're trying to achieve with those various marketing channels. You also need to be mapping out how long and how much money that you want to be spending as well. So this is something that you can be constantly working on, print out, stick it up on your wall, just as a reminder to be making sure you are carrying out all of those activities. And something that I think is really useful, and which I advise a lot of the businesses that I speak to, is to actually ring fence some time for your marketing activity. It can be quite tricky just to dip in 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And as we've already noted, it's marketing tends to be the thing that gets left at the bottom of the pile. So, I recommend spending perhaps an hour a day, or it might be half a day a week. Find a pattern that works for you and your business, but make sure you diarise that time. Stick it in the diary. Don't let any other appointments or activity get in the way. And when it comes to social media in particular, there are some great planning tools and content tools out there that can help you. So you may have heard of things like Buffer or Content Cow, which can enable you to line up all your content weeks in advance. So you don't have that nagging feeling of, oh, I haven't posted anything today. But one word of warning on that: scheduled posts are great, but it's also good to be able to still be reactive and spontaneous with some of your posting as well. You don't want some big national global event to occur and then you've forgotten about your scheduled posts, which might suddenly pop up and strike a bit of an inappropriate or perhaps even insensitive note. And finally, on that action list is measure. So we've touched upon this already, but it's worth repeating. Your time, your effort, and your money is very precious, especially at the stage that you're all at now, at the very beginning of your business. And you're quite possibly doing everything yourself as well. So marketing is a learning process. You need to schedule regular reviews to measure the success of your marketing and perhaps adapt, adjust, and change the activity accordingly. So you might, for example, measure the increase in traffic to your website after an email campaign, or perhaps the number of new followers to your Facebook page, or the new inquiries generated. But just very important that you're constantly measuring the value of the activity that you do, because you don't want it to be detracting from other important areas of your business. So we're almost at the end there. We've covered quite a lot. Hopefully, a number of things there that will be helpful to you in starting off your marketing strategy. But the point of all of these startup sessions, I think, I'm sure Ant will agree, is that this is an introduction. Marketing is a huge topic. The idea is that we're giving you a few directors, a few pointers, and a flavour of the sorts of areas that you need to be looking at. And it's now for you to go away and do a little bit of further work and research yourself. But as I say, hopefully that gives you a flavour of some of the things that you need to be talking about and thinking about when it comes to planning your marketing in your startup.